I'd like to go ahead and welcome everybody out to our City Council General Meeting for June 20th, 2018. Just a note, we have, Jackie, do we need an actual motion to, okay, so we're good? Okay. So we did walk out of our work meeting to a nice surprise that I hope we will get an update on here in just a little bit. But we will start with a Pledge of Allegiance that will be led by Scout Troop 1125.
Will the audience please stand and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming out tonight. All right. Are there any items 1.2? Are there any council disclosures for conflict of interest for tonight?
No. None.
Okay. We'll move on to item 1.3, mayor and council comments and recognitions. Okay.
None for me at this time.
All right then. We will go ahead and move to item 2, which is our public comment. Audience members may bring any item to the mayor or council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law does prohibit the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. So if there's any individuals that would like to make comment at this time, we would invite you to stand up to the podium and do such. All right, seeing no comment at this time, we will go ahead and close the public comment portion of our meeting. I do just like to make note at this point that those that may be watching online at harriman.org, while we do always value your opinion, comments are not part of the public record. So just please be aware of that item. All right, we will go on to item 3, which is mayor and council board and committee reports.
Mayor, if I could start out just briefly, I had the pleasure of attending the UFA board meeting and publicly complimented not only their service, our appreciation for what they do for our community, both as community partners, but certainly for the skill in which they keep our community safe, and for the manner in which they have created a very open and transparent environment, expressed on behalf of the council how pleased we are to have them as part of our city. And so I would like to say thank you. Maybe he's hiding. Chief Peterson.
He's hiding.
So first of all, Chief Pilgrim, for just continuously being a good presence for us in the city and showing us everything we need to know so that we can properly, there he is, properly vet to our residents. And then again, a thank you to Chief Peterson for joining us again tonight. I have found this organization to be highly transparent. What you'll hear tonight from the chief is again, the opportunity to answer some additional questions that we had. So thank you for taking the time.
Okay. Any other council reports?
Just make a quick comment here on UPD. The board meeting for June is actually tomorrow morning, where we anticipate them to pass a budget, which will give us hopefully give us some direction in our continuing negotiations with them. I think everybody's up to date on where we're at with that. Chief Carr and his team are doing a fantastic job, so hopefully we'll get some more numbers tomorrow I can share with you.
And from what I've heard and seen, is that this is a positive process that's been moving forward on both sides, and we express our appreciation both to Harriman Police Department and to Unified Police Department for that continuing ongoing effort. Thank you very much. All right, we will go ahead and move on to item 4, which is reports, presentations, and appointments. And the first item is item 4.1, 2018 Grand Marshal for Harriman Town Days. Brett Wood.
Sorry, Council Mayor, I move a little slower these days than last week. I'm very grateful to be here. Didn't want to miss this opportunity. Tell you how this came about. We did an online survey and solicited votes and applications from residents and those who wanted to submit for the Grand Marshal. this year for our 2018 Town Days. I think it's wrong that staff asked me to do this, so. But having worked with this man for the last 25 years alongside him, and one thing I need to set for the record, I know there's a lot of things been said about the beginning and the first mayor and why do we have density and all these things, blaming people. I always knew working around him, he had one main thought, always. What's the best for Harriman, and never shutting the door for those who wanted to come. And even the people that said we couldn't do it, even the people that said that you can't make it happen, you'll fail, even the people that criticized every movement that young community was coming together, he stayed to them and he always treated them very fair. He has a very famous quote, issues are issues and people are people, and don't cross the paths of the two. Deal with the issues professionally and deal with people the way that you should, with your heart. With that, knowing that it has been 20 years since 1998, I remember that fall before 1999, when the infamous timeline that we actually incorporated as a young city, young township. And knowing what's passed since then and the years prior to that, and knowing what's going on in this man's life right now, it's a great honor that he made it here tonight. For all the work and heart that he's put into this beautiful community that we've become, and it is beautiful. Look out the windows. It is beautiful. It's my honor to present to you Mayor Jalen Crane, the 2018 Grand Marshal for Harriman Town Days. Sorry, Mayor. We have a little award for you. You want me to come to you?
Yeah, we brought him a microphone.
So this is probably heavier than I am, so.
Yeah, I can use that as a weight for something.
Just don't throw it at me.
Okay. The Grand Marshal. I don't know what all that entails, but it's been, I appreciate the opportunity to participate while I still can, a little bit. And so I was thinking as we came in here, went up the concrete to get up the stairs, about who would have ever thought that 20 years ago we would never have thought that we'll see what we see here right now. And I don't think any of us who were involved really would have thought that at the time. I just, looking around here, and I don't know what's behind us, but I see three, if I count myself, three of us that were here on day number one. And that would be John Brems, our attorney, who advised us, and I think it was kind of a stroke of good luck, or however you want to say, when we were asked who was going to be our attorney. And my wife says, I say the same stories over and over, so you may have heard this before, but I said to Brent Overson, Well, we don't know. We're going through the yellow pages. he kind of got a little smile on his face. I think he wanted to laugh out loud. And he said, well, don't let me tell you what to do, but you might want to consider John Brims. So we called John, and he met with us that night in my home. It was the beginning of lots of long days and long nights. Today, we see what we have, and we do have a wonderful facility here. I'm probably a little biased, but I don't know where I would go in the valley to see a more impressive city hall and the park that you put out there. I think it's wonderful. And I hear from people, I don't see as many people as I used to, but usually in the hospital, the doctor, and home, but I run into someone, and they are from Harriman, and they make comment on this park, on this hall. They weren't here to see it grow, but they're pretty impressed. And so all of this you probably didn't ask for, and so nevertheless, it's been a labor of love. It's been a labor of service to see this community grow and to see the numbers of people that we have that are so devoted, to see that we continue to grow wisely. And we may not always agree, but if we can be kind and considerate and respectful to each other in our disagreement, we need to pay attention to that. And just because someone disagrees with us doesn't mean that he or she is our enemy. Just means that we have a different point of view, but we're still dealing with people. Brett probably put as much or more effort and time into the beginnings of the city as anybody here. And when I was here, we worked closely together. He taught me very many things. I didn't know he was going to be here. I had a little plaque made, and on it, it says, "Oh, brother, you've got to be kidding me." Issues are issues. And I could have put a few more there, but there wasn't enough room. And I was going to bring it and give it to Brett. I'll get it to him. But at any rate, today is a different day. It's a different day for me. I'm not able to do what I used to be able to do, and I recognize that. I wouldn't be able to do a lot of what I do if it wasn't for my son, James, who supports me and sees me around, sees that I get where I need to be, and I have other children. He happens to be the closest, and so he's probably the first one we call, and I appreciate that. I appreciate each of you. I do see, while I only see 3 people from the beginning, I see most of the faces around here I've had some interaction with, and I'm glad you're involved. I'm glad you're committed to the same kinds of effort that began in the beginning, and that is, we used to talk about a royal, I remember, flavor in a No. I, I have one piece of advice for you. If you can avoid growing old. In an urban environment, we want to stay as rural-minded as we can and create at least some kind of an attitude or an impression or a feeling that people feel as they drive through the community. That might give them, I don't know, appreciation for the community and for what we stand for.
Mayor, if I might.
Even though we have a metropolitan.
Mayor, if I might cut in there for a minute, I want to share with you something that happened last week at a town hall that we had. And I think you would be proud of the way that the residents of Harriman focused on the feel of our community and the feel of what we have here as they discussed big decisions that were being made in the county. And I was truly impressed with the way that they related to our community, and I attribute a lot of that to our founding leaders who have focused from the beginning on making sure that we are a community with a community feel. And as a council, I know we all want to take the time to express our appreciation to you for everything that you've done to help us have a community that we can raise our families in. And we appreciate it, and we are very grateful for you. Thank you very much.
Well, I thank you very much for that. And I thank you for the invitation to be in the parade. I'm sure there may be some that say, isn't he ever going to go away? and they may be able to justify that, but we'll try to be there and represent the city as best we can. I'm probably not going to be on top of the car waving, but we'll try to.
Mayor, would it be okay if we came down and took a picture with you?
I didn't hear it.
You want to come down and take a picture with you?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
No, I'm glad you didn't. Glad you didn't. No, none. None at all.
Good man.
Very good man.
Good as they come.
Yep, none finer, for sure. have it
I'll take
digitally,
a
so,
hard copy, yeah, thank you so much.
yeah, I've got it digitally, so I'm good.
Yeah, leave one for Brett, yeah. Yeah, I just like to.
Take a hard copy if you have it.
Before we move on, I want to take a minute to be able to just make a brief comment about Mayor Crane. And, when it comes to selection of a grand marshal for a parade, or someone to recognize for that matter for any type of city event, it certainly should be focused on those who have been pillars in our communities. And there's been no bigger pillar, I believe, in our community than Mayor Crane, and the dedication that he has displayed to our community for, said over 20 years. And I've had the opportunity to know him, and there is no finer man.
Mayor, this mayor, the only mayor that, right up here, there. Oh, so many things to say. I have not had a better moment at City Council than the one I'm having right now. See how I'm gonna get. Mayor Crane was my very first mayor, my first job in government, and far too short of a time. What I learned from you in the short amount of time that we got to work together, and it went by speedy, but what I learned from you is that there are in fact elected officials who have political courage to do the hard things, that are fierce advocates for those they serve, that love them truly and authentically, that are witty as can be, that are loved still in the broader community. You are revered as one of the best, Mayor, and you deserve it, and you've earned it, and you are loved by all who know you, and certainly by me. And I thank you for all that you've brought into my life, not just learning from you in terms of politics, but more importantly, what I learned from you about life and about love and about caring. So you are, I will say, I love you. You are a genuine, wonderful man. Thank you for all you've done for myself and for the community.
I don't know how I would follow that, but I appreciate that was beautiful, Nicole. I appreciate all you've done too. I haven't had an opportunity to know you well, other than just watching city business go on with you at the head, and I just always very much appreciate anybody who will put themselves forth to be a public servant as you've done. So thank you.
That's about all we can say is thank you, Mayor, to think about the things that we're doing now, but as you're kind of reminiscing a little bit about getting things started, I can't even imagine going through all of that and seeing what it is now and where we're heading. So really all we can do is be thankful to you and the other brave souls who embarked on that journey.
And I might wrap up here, Mayor, once again with a personal thank you. I've only been here in the city for a third of its existence. I was not here when you were going through all of those late nights. But I get the benefit of bringing my family in here. And it's something special. It really is. I love our community. I think we all do. That's why we're all sitting here today. And we get to be here because of the love that you showed and that all of the members of the council and staff have shown for the last 2 decades for what they knew this city could become. I can't go to a meeting anywhere in the valley with other elected officials where they don't stop and say, wow, you have done something amazing. And I don't get to take any credit for that because it was not me. It was not necessarily those that are sitting here when it finally shows up. They're saying wow to the efforts that were placed by so many so long before us. And we are so grateful on behalf of not only ourselves, but of the residents of the city, the thousands and hundreds of thousands of people that are affected by the decisions you made 20 years ago. We all say thank you. And the world is a better place because of it. So thank you. And now, so unceremoniously, we will move to somebody who has to follow that up. and move on to our next item. Our item 4.2, American Society of Landscape Architectural Design Excellence Award presentation. Wendy.
Wendy, make it emotional.
No, I've already, you made me emotional, it was you. Bryce Ward is here tonight to present the city an award that we accepted, a couple weeks ago. Everything's a blur, right? June is a blur, let's just admit it. Bryce is the president of the American Society of Landscape Architects for Utah, and he was also a big part of this project. He worked for GSBS at the time when we were going through the planning stages. So I'll turn the time over to Bryce, and he'll kind of explain the award and what it means and how we got it.
Thank you, Wendy. Definitely hard to follow up. I know when we were going through the design process, if I can just add before talking about this award, Mayor Crane sat in some of those meetings, and he gave us a lot of the history that influenced the design that you see out there. So I'm also personally grateful for him and his example to us. So, and I think I appropriately named for the park. So I'm here to present the city a well-deserved award from the Utah chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects. Every year we hold an annual meeting in the spring, early summer, and at that meeting we present awards of projects throughout the state. We get several submissions, and there are several different categories for award. We start with a merit award, which is superior landscape architecture design. Then we have an honor award, which is a step above that. And then rarely we actually have an award for excellence. And this year, I think it was one of the first in a few years that we've been given the award of excellence. How we go about this, the Colorado chapter, our neighbors just to the west, they receive our submissions, and then they will jury these awards. And I wanted to share with you some of their words and what they said about this project when they were judging it. First, on behalf of the ASLA Colorado chapter, I'm pleased to submit your jury awards selections and associate comments for each entry. These reflect a summary of the thorough, diverse discussions we had earlier this year. All the submissions represent a high level of thoughtful design and demonstrate the importance and significance of landscape architecture. Each entry was a great accomplishment in the practice of landscape architecture. Utah clearly has an impressive design community that advances the profession and the built world. And here is their specific comment on the Harriman City Hall and Town Center project. They said, this project exemplifies the value added to public space when site-specific strategies, historical context, community needs, and innovative solutions are at the heart of the design and subsequently carried through the construction. The creative year-round elements offer engaging and interactive features that will no doubt draw people to the site and in turn highlight our profession's value to a greater community for many years to come. So it's my honor tonight to present to you this award of excellence for the Harriman Town Center and City Hall. Thank you.
So we're gonna take another photo, so.
Hope to see you again soon.
All right, let's see if we can kick up the emotion. a little bit more. I'm just kidding. Unified Fire Authority service, our level of service update. Chief Peterson from UFA. Thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm not so sure about the emotion. Maybe I'll be able to change that a little bit and move us through this. First, thanks for giving us a chance to come. We always love talking about the service that we provide. Some cities we go to and we ask what they're looking for, and they just want us to take care of business. Others have good questions, so we appreciate the chance to be here. But I am going to make one comment related to what Mayor Crane had a statement of, and it actually, my first chance to, I'm new to Utah, I've been here about a year and a half. Really good story, but the comment that he made has really become a big part of our vision as well with UFA in a manner that says as you get larger, as you get bigger, as you do things, you can't lose that local feel, right? And I think what you described is very accurate to the energy that we've put this last year and a half into the UFA of just because we might be a larger organization, we have to have the local feel. You have to feel like our firefighters are part of your community, that we're here and we're engaged. People like Riley Pilgrim are here for partly that reason, and our ability to support that is a really big piece of that. So I liked that comment, and it really dovetails well into really what we've been trying to accomplish. So I've got a large memo in front of you. I'm going to walk through that, and it's about 8 pages. That'll hopefully give you some good pictures. Thanks, Nicole, for shepherding the clarification of all the issues, and we'll be able to make sure this is clear. And honestly, this is probably the 3rd or 4th city I've done this basic same information exchange for. So it's a pretty normal request, and it should be one that the cities want to know the details about. Let's stage with the revenue and expenses. So in here, Harriman is part of the Unified Fire Service area. Taxes are collected directly from the residents to pay basically for the service. Unified Fire Service area is a member of the UFA that delivers the service. That took me forever to get my head around coming here. You know, it's a unique piece, but the taxing authority does one piece, and the service delivery is through the authority. So every member that's in there. But internal to Harriman City, the property tax collected was $3.3 million, and I'll let the numbers reflect out from the chart as we go through. But in addition to that, because it's a taxing authority, there's a few other pieces that come in. The motor vehicle fees tallied up to about $209,000, and impact fees, as you've been growing, have gone up. The average for the last 3 years is $600,000, and that will help us immensely. We have 2 stations we need to build, one relocation, one new. Those are part of those packages that the impact fees cover, right? That helps manage that. But so the total collected, $4.1 million, is what's collected as far as cash in hand. Really, the property tax and the motor vehicle fees are about the service delivery through the Unified Fire Authority, and the impact fees are part of where it fits into the construction and maintenance of the capital facilities. Cost to provide service. This is a complicated conversation to make it simple. You know, it takes a lot of time to clarify some things. Previously, we worked on what was called a member fee FTE rate per firefighter position. The thing that bothered me with that is as the district grew, the number stayed the same, which shouldn't happen. It should actually get lower. That number should reduce as you grow in regional approach. So today, the member fee system, which I'll walk through with you, is designed to manage that so that there is good scalable value in the system as it works as a whole. So we're in that phase, and we're working through that part, which really adds to that piece. We are able also to effectively carve out the city and identify that what it actually costs us, because it's all the same, whether you're a contractor part of UFSA, it's the same for everybody. So it equalized that through all the cities. There's no difference that comes in, it's just how that fits in. So The member fee, which I'll go into detail on page 2, is $3.7 million. There's a bond payment for fire station construction. These next 3 lines are really related to UFSA. So there's a bond payment that's $218,000 is what we would calculate as Harriman City's share. So Harriman City sits at 8.67% of the taxes that are collected. So 8.67% are considered the expenses of the UFSA. It's really simple math in that vein. And that particular bond payment goes out till 2033, and it pays for the 6 or 7 stations. Some were built with cash, some built with the other. And then we'll move into another construction process, which we'll also talk about real soon, where that fits in. But that cost is shared throughout the UFSA. So there's not any one community that burdens that entire cost. It's shared through all members. The administration of UFSA is $63,000. We have a contract administrator that we implemented to help separate the duties and get some clarity so there wasn't some of the challenges that might come from that. And the financial work is all done with UFA staff, but it's charged back directly to the UFSA separate to make sure that it's not burdened into the UFA budget into non-UFA cities as well. And then the station capital improvements. Basically, the major capital pieces like roof repair, major kitchen remodels are done by the UFSA. All of the normal maintenance work is all done by the UFA internally. So again, sharing that across is $32,000, which makes the total cost for a little over $4 million to provide service to Harriman City. That covers everything: fire stations, fire engines, all the support services, and that particular model. So we're really close to where it fits, right? Now there is a tax increase, and you can see that the tax increase will, this next year will bring in about 3.6 instead of 3.3. And what it really is doing is preparing us for that extra company that needs to be placed in Harriman as Harriman grows, and we'll talk about that soon. That will add another layer of cost to the UFSA, but it'll be shared across the UFSA as a whole, a lot of that being paid for as Harriman City grows and continues to expand out towards that Rose Canyon area. Page 2, if we go into member fee, so the way we've defined this is the fee structure says what is the first due area for all the engines and trucks in the entire system, and that's basically who's closest to that area. So take a circle, and that becomes a zone. So you see the term zone used as opposed to necessarily station. That zone, if 100% of that zone is inside the city of Harriman, you would pay 100% of the cost of that station. And then we've embedded in that station the staffing cost and all the regional services. And they're basically done on a percentage by how that fits in. Every engine and truck company has a first due area to make that fit. But what you can see in that chart is Zone 103 had 1,658 total incidents, 1,386 were in the city, so 83.6% of the burden of that particular station is burdened to Harriman, not 100%. So another really big benefit of that regional part is that Harriman would only be charged 83% of that cost. So Zone 121 comes into a little piece because it can beat the other stations, which again, drop geographical and political boundaries and go with who can get there first, which is the most important piece for the citizen. 12.5% of that station's calls are in the city of Harriman, and 123, 72.8% of those station calls are in the city of Harriman. The direct cost of the engine and truck company, 24/7, plus all the regional costs are carried into that piece. So when we put another fire station in, what we do then is we redecide what's the added cost for logistical support in that station. There's going to be utility costs. There's going to be potentially an additional engine, which will have to be reflected into the capital cost. But there probably won't be much more necessary for training prevention, and a number of things. So the regional cost should drop and will drop as that goes. So we go through and decide what the new impact would be. And then that's reflected across the entire member fee across all of those regions. Just adding another group of people doesn't automatically apply the same FTE number that was being applied in the past. Does that make sense? This map down below is basically a scatter of the incidents that these stations are responding to, and you can see a number of them in the unincorporated area outside of Harriman, and that's where a big piece of those calls then are burdened strictly to the UFSA unincorporated areas taxable zone, which is why you're seeing not 100%. So it offsets that cost that would come into the city of Harriman. Questions so far? Okay. So the member fee piece then comes in, if you go to page 3, talks about these portions. And for fiscal year 17-18, a 3-person crew with all the regional costs is a little over 1.9 million, and a 4-person is a little over 2.3. Sharing those costs show you what those actuals are in here. So 103 with 83.6 and a 4-person career crew. We don't have any part-time personnel on our engines and trucks. Some of those are operating in our ambulances, but we've chose to try to benefit from consistent teamwork with a 3- and 4-person crews in our system, which tends to make a good difference for us. So station 103, 1.9 is burdened to Harriman, 123, 1.6, and then 121 is 288,000. So when we go through our budget cycle, and as we all know, we budget for the expenses, but we don't always spend everything, right? We're maintaining a minimum of an 8.5% ending fund balance, which is really our beginning fund. So anything in addition to that, the board gets a chance to look at what they want to do with that. And I may recommend some of it move into capital, but the rest of it gets returned back to the members in a credit. So the credit comes back for Harriman to the UFSA, and it's based on the percentage of that particular city's burden comparable to everybody else. So it becomes a percentage. So in Harriman, that amount ends up being 129,000, gets returned back to UFSA, so they can save that for the future other capital projects. It comes in after we calculate all of the member fees, drops into that particular line. If for some reason we had a significant amount of ending fund, it would reduce that cost. If we had a catastrophe of some kind that we chose to take care of with funds that might end us going into fund balance, we might not have as much. But we know every year we don't spend everything allocated, and we do not spend out those line items. When we work on our budget, and Nicole can speak to this as well, we focus on a division that wants to buy 4 widgets, budgets for 4 widgets. When the budget line comes up and all of a sudden it looks like they can afford to buy 6, they still have to only buy 4 because that's what they asked for. That doesn't get rolled into the other part of it. That is a big responsibility. We centralize all of our contingencies. Those are not built into every division. So if they end up with a problem, we'll take care of it. If they needed 4 and now they can only afford to buy 3 and we really need to get to 4, we can do that. But we don't do that inside of each of the divisions. So each of the divisions operates much more like a CEO of their world. And if you look at the budget, you'll see it broken out that way. Each division is writing its own budget message, sharing its own mission, tying their action items to the strategic plan, and it has to go through a number of screenings before they get to that point. And that will guarantee that we won't be overspending, and we'll manage it very early in how we make that fit. And I think because we can manage with 8.5% contingency, we don't want to start with a greater number than that at beginning fund. So it's treated as new revenue and then credited back for the upcoming year. Make sense? Pretty simple piece. So clearly the addition of a 3rd station, which we have property for at on West Rose Canyon Road is going to be a key part of that, you know, a key part of this particular growth. That's going to end up increasing the cost to the city. There'll have to be some sort of a loan to build the fire stations we're going to build, and we're probably going to be looking at 3 to 5 stations over the next 2 years. 103 is one of those that needs to be relocated, and Rose Canyon needs to be built as that grows. Currently, we try to put them in a 4-minute footprint, which helps us with response times, as we talk here in a minute. And right now, in the city of Harriman, 14% of your incidents last year were outside of that 4-minute drive time. And that's going to continue to increase as those areas continue to grow. And we're going to be looking for that trigger point where it says it's time. It's time to build and staff that fire station. The standards of cover work that we're doing right now and over the next year and a half is about establishing exactly what the standards are that the UFA delivers its service. It's not something that's been in place. I had a couple things to take care of over the last year, and now we're working into this coming year is about getting that locked up, and you're going to see more community meetings and conversations about what that looks like. But that's where it helps us with pulling the trigger on when we actually build and replace fire stations, or if we relocate, or if we staff up. Once we have a footprint, as an area gets busier, then we can add resources to that existing station with the target of hitting the 4-minute travel time as we go through that. But 14% is a larger number than I'm comfortable with, but we know where we're targeted and we know we have land. I would rather that be under 5% of a built-upon area. When we get into unincorporated, it's a different model. It's a different concern in that particular zone. So incident response, it comes in here. I've given you an average time. You asked for that, but average usually isn't used for really evaluating the criticality of pieces. A 90th percentile has become a really important target for us to look at. And it's generally a higher number because what it's saying is that 90% of the time, Zone 103 receives a response in 9 minutes and 40 seconds. You can see the average is significantly less than that. So roughly 50% of the time, it sees a 6-minute 27, and sometimes it sees a 2-minute response. But when you're targeting at a 90th percentile, you're talking about 10% of the time they're not hitting their 4-minute travel times and the call processing, and we start to look at the weaknesses. We know that we have some weaknesses today in the time it takes us to process our calls. We're part of that problem by not allowing that to be streamlined at the dispatch center. We also know that we have not been measuring historically our turnout time regularly, the time it takes when they're notified to the time they get on the engine. And those are areas we know we have to improve in. But before we do that, we want to have a tool that allows them to measure that and track that. And we're working on that tool through a system that we received a grant on last year called Intera. It allows us to measure in all sorts of different ways automatically with live data. You'll also see a forward-facing part of that software that you'll be able to use for the city of Harriman to look at your calls, where they're happening, what the response times are, what's the turnout, where are the motor vehicle accidents, where are the structure fires. You're going to have that available to you through a link on our website. When you'll have each city will have their own page inside the website, and Intera will be a piece of that you can link into your city, and your community can go look at their calls. We obviously have to keep it from violating any HIPAA requirements, right? But you can start trending that yourself. And so you'll see Riley come in here soon, hopefully soon, where you'll start to see live data, and you can ask questions, and he can show you how to use that tool when that fits in. So that's in path and coming in to make that easier. Zone 121 with a shorter time is really because they're not going into those unincorporated areas. They're not having the longer response times. Rose Canyon will make a difference in these response times and will make a difference in the amount of station responses that are outside of that 4-minute travel time. Other questions on this page? So the responses, pretty common question, and Intera also we have a template for a standard city report that all of our cities will get, which will be a lot more in performance measurement instead of just the historical, here's how many calls you had. And one of those pieces that's in that report is this particular chart that talks about who actually came into the city, what stations really responded. And these are defined here in total unit responses. So a lot of calls only require a single unit, but some require 6 or 8. So these are unit responses as a whole. So where did resources come in? Station 121 came in a lot. Most of that is because the ambulances are there, and they're coming into the city. 103, 123, and then you can see a host of other UFA stations that came in either to cover or to be a second, third, or fourth unit that's coming in on a particular incident. The mutual aid incidents, South Jordan came in 20 times, Bluffdale 17, West Jordan 9, and Draper 2. Of those calls, of those 48, 32 of those were really just in support of UFA resources that were already responding. So the times when a UFA resource was unavailable was 0.7% of the time. And that's part of our mutual aid, which is a really reasonable number for us to look at, that we were not available 0.7% of that time. The busier a station gets, and some of our stations are fairly busy, the less response reliability they have, which means they're already tied up on a call before when the next call comes. We don't have as much of that problem in Harriman. It's a really good balance of being able to be available for those calls more often. But as we all know, the calls don't space themselves out nicely. They tend to come in groups of 6, and then they go away for a while, and then they come in groups of 4.
Solid for 3 days straight during fireworks.
Yeah, that's a real common piece in that. Going back to that previous page, I did want to point out the ambulances. The ambulances were placed in a single station, and their response times are still consistent with where the engine response times are in the city because they're moving around a lot. And the decision was to put them in the center of the battalion between the 2 cities, and they would be able to move a little bit quicker and better. And I had to ask the question, how in the world could they still get a 6-minute 30, which is consistent on average with 103 and 123? And so the system is working for that operations picked as far as centralizing those ambulances. And those ambulances are a regional resource. They're not considered part of the engine and truck staffing model. So there's a good amount of their deployment it's about a break-even model for us between the billing and the response. And as a regional resource, everybody shares in them. They have a bigger response area than just the first due zone.
But our engines can still provide first response.
Yes.
For medical
well,
response.
Generally speaking, we're going to put 4 people with a paramedic or 2 on that engine, on that patient, and start working it, and then the ambulance comes in to support that.
Yeah, so even if the engine gets there first, there's still a paramedic there to take care of someone. So it's not, that's one of the reasons I would see that system working.
Yeah, it's working well in that way. And the staffing model, we'll talk a little bit about, which goes in, unless there was any other questions on page 4.
I, just out of more curiosity than anything else, as we're looking at possible new stations and the need for them, I see this response chart that we're looking at. I'd like to see how often a station is unable to respond, by station, how often the stations are unable to respond to the calls that normally would be within their time, broken out, just so we can see if there's an issue that we may need to address, as opposed to, obviously overall UFA is doing extremely well, but maybe there's an issue in a particular station that we might need to address.
Yeah, that is exactly what response reliability sits into. And it may be defined to you more in a way as how often did a unit respond from within the zone or outside of the zone?
Yeah, and just
So,
seeing a zone,
because there
if there's
could be that particular engine might be out, but another engine might be in.
Sure.
And when we look at that particular monitor, there'll be a piece of that that'll be easy to track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be these stations, just making sure the people in those zones are responded to in a timely manner, and there's
Right.
not an outlier somewhere.
Today, our data analysis is cumbersome. Getting the data out of the dispatch center comes in a challenging way. Trying to bring that and validate that data has been difficult, which is partly why this new software is going to be so important. We've spent this last 6 months making sure that the data is valid. Once we get all that in and it works well, we had a very unique problem with the data when it first exported. They removed all of the dots in the lat long. So we basically had to put all the incidents in Utah Lake. You know, all 60,000 responses went into Utah Lake until we could figure out how to put that back. So the staff spent a lot of time, but once you get the data validated and get it exported correctly into the right tool, now you can really do some work and we can start creating some quality stuff. You'll be able to go answer those questions in Polk, and it's very interesting. You give that tool to firefighters and you say, we want you to do better, they'll start finding an area that we can do something different. Sometimes you find that your response times during this time of day are horrible, and potentially posting a unit inside that circle during these 2 hours can drastically change your response times. But you need the tool that's flexible enough to start looking at the evaluation and not waste your time with it. So this tool will give us a lot of those options, and again, give you a chance to look personally at what's going on in your city. The inside-outside, I did kind of neglect to hit that part. The inside first two areas, 82% of 103's calls they responded to, and then they had another 167 calls that they went outside of the first two area or outside of Harriman City and on down. 121 splits a little different because it's also a heavy rescue type of unit. But the part of the plus is that 2 engines or 3 engines even in the city can't handle a house fire fully. You need 3 or 4. You need 4 engines, battalion chiefs, and then if you have a victim or a second floor fire, you probably need another few more. So that's what's also driving those responses into that movement, in and out, sharing that load. The ambulance side of it, we've placed peak ambulances that get moved around based on demand. So if all of a sudden the 2 ambulances in this area are gone, we're moving another ambulance in from another section, which is peak. We know that we have 3 times the call volume at 2 in the afternoon than 2 in the morning. We know that with the routine types calls, but if we could anticipate exactly when structure fires would occur, that would be a wonderful tool. So if you want to make millions of dollars, find that tool, and then we can staff up
arson.
during.
I believe that's called arson.
What's that?
I believe that's called arson, knowing where the fires are going to be. We don't want that.
Yeah. You'd have to be exclusive, though, in your arson
Yeah, there you go.
work. So those pieces. Are there any questions on that chart? The staffing model, so really in July 2017, we reconfigured throughout the agency with a focus really on trying to get us to 4-person staffing for a variety of reasons that I'll go through that down here. But when we looked at the whole sequence, we found 2 stations that were really overlapped in their 4-minute travel times. And so we utilized those positions and reallocated them throughout the region to get us to a closer area than the built-upon area. So today, 18 of our 24 crews are staffed at 4-person, and it was really in the built-upon area in the Salt Lake County region, and with a goal of trying to do a little bit more than that at that point. Harriman originally had the 3-person crews and an ambulance now running with 4-person crews. So there's 8 people on duty in the engines and trucks inside the city, and another 4-person crew that's picking up a wedge that can get to closer. So really, there's 12 people responding in on engines and trucks, and another 4 people coming in on ambulances, 2 and 2, to make that fit. The 1-in-1, this is really a single paramedic response model that we are trialing right now. Instead of running with 2 paramedics on each ALS unit, we're trialing a concept of a single medic on the engine and a single medic on the ambulance. And then when they get together, they're able to operate as 2. But doing that can allow us to make everything an advanced life support. And we're experimenting with that and a few others. We're listening to the feedback on whether the quality is there or not, and then move from there. So I'm waiting to hear that report back from it's a great group that's arguing back and forth on the validity of that particular concept. My favorite kind of meeting that they get into, it's just short of anarchy. There's just enough order that people aren't killing each other, but they're having great dialogue, great arguments. That's where the real value comes in what they're going to come to as a recommendation. So I'm looking forward to that piece of it, and that'll come fairly soon. But one of those trials is operating here in Harriman to make sure that we have all ALS today as we go through this trial period. So 4-person staffing, what the fire and rescue system, one of the key things that we all want to remember is that when one of your residents has a serious problem and they dial 911, what they're asking for is their problem to go away, right? I mean, what they want is the fire to go out. They want to be cut out of that car. They want to have the wildland fire put out and stop threatening their home. If we were strictly concerned with response times, I'd put every firefighter on a Harley Davidson and get them there in about a minute. The problem is they just, you might like that, Brett, that would be a good thing. But the problem would be that you'd have to get 4 of them together before you could enter the house, or you'd have to get 3 of them together to do this task. And so we operate in teams with the concept of we're trying to solve the problem, which means from the time you dial 911 to the time we actually put the fire out on the 2nd floor. So it's a call to action time. Very easy to measure response times, a little more difficult, and that'll be some of the work that we do to make sure that we can effectively measure that. But there's been some good data done and some good scientific studies implemented on how much a difference 3- and 4-person crews can make. 3 are totally safe. They do a great job on a good number of incidents, but on some of the critical ones, they can't quite do the same thing. So that piece of it, that next page kind of summarizes some of those key points. The improved performance capability, that call to action is talked about here. When 4 people can show up in a major traffic accident, they can actually begin doing more things if they're used to having 4 people. If they move from 3 to 4, their teamwork isn't as good. It's kind of like if you've gone camping and you're the one that always puts stuff away. If you pair up with somebody, you can put it away quicker, but you leave all the poles behind because somebody forgot that, right? It's having everybody into a routine of how to do that particular task becomes really valuable. The captain can also decide to deploy the proper units. So with a 4-person, you could take a brush rig and a tender with 2 people and go out the door instead of a brush rig with 2 and a tender with 1 or something different. Showing up on a fire that's advancing up to a house with 4 people on an engine, you can take and put lines on both sides safely with 2 people and make sure that the fire gets diverted around that house, where a 3-person crew either has to pick a side or have a person all alone on one side, which starts to get a little more questionable. Can do that, but it's different. So it really becomes a level of risk tolerance, really, for the community in where that fits. 2 and 2 out, OSHA has a regulation that requires us to have 2 people outside available to rescue people who are inside. So, and then inside, you need to put 2 people inside. So the first engine that shows up, if they're a 3-person, they can't really go in if there's not an immediate rescue until the next engine shows. And it's not going to be that far behind. You know, it might be a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It could be, and it could be that it works out fine. But part of the benefit of a 4-person crew is that that question doesn't have to be asked. They can go in and deal with it. And if there's a rescue, they're going to be able to effect that rescue safer for those firefighters. That ends up being a benefit. The critical tasks.
Chief, I can't imagine anything more frustrating than seeing your home on fire and an engine in front unable to do anything. So, you know, the model there becomes so important in gaining the trust of the public.
It's a benefit. It's a good thing to have, but it's costly, right? I mean, it's an expensive piece to do, but it does offer some great service when you can make that happen. The critical tasks that occur, U.S. Department of Commerce, the NIST, National Institute of Safety and Training, did some really great work on both fire and EMS, trying to test 3, 4, 5-person crews. And they took the typical single-family dwellings and all the routine incidents that occur, and they found there's really 22 essential firefighting tasks that need to get done. And as you make that fit into an incident, with 4-person crews, you can get that jumble of tasks done about 5 minutes faster. So you can get to the second floor faster, you can ventilate faster. That combination of things makes a difference. Now, it doesn't mean that a single task is done 5 minutes faster. It means the combination of skills are done quicker. So when critical tasks need to be done, a 4-person crew assigned is going to get them done better. There are some times when 4 people aren't necessary. 30, 40% maybe of the time, there's a call that the 4th person isn't helping, but it's not hurting. But when you have the critical event, again, it goes back to the time you want your fire out. How fast do you want to get the person out of the car? And then in the end, the improved outcome on the incidents, generally speaking, the incidents such as building fires, grass fires, vehicle accidents, vehicle fires, cardiac events, traumatic injuries often see a better outcome when the first 4-person crew shows up ready to go to work. And then the ambulance can come in behind that piece. So that's, again, where that fits in. Any questions on that part? The last 2 pages are station coverage. So fire station coverage, this map right here on page 7 shows your existing configuration. And if you look, you can see 103, you can see 123, and you see that color and kind of an amoeba. That's showing the driving areas that is in a 4-minute travel time through the GIS work. That shows that whole section there in Harriman that's not being covered. And that's really predominantly where the 17% of the calls are occurring that are not hit in that particular spot. Station 121, you can see where it comes in and overlaps into parts of Harriman. So in the time when 103's first due area is not hit, it's a good chance that 121 is going to be there in that same time frame because of that overlap. And then a portion of Harriman City is first due for 121, which is 12.5% of the call volume for station 121. Then when you turn the page, now what you see is where we're going in Harriman. This shows the future relocation of 103 and the future Rose Canyon. So you can see 103, the concept really that the city manager Wood brought to us in talking about where it could be moved over a little bit and possibly pick up that zone a little better, along with moving it. So we are looking actually at property besides what we own for 103 to make this work. And this is generally where it would be, not exactly where it might be. And then you can see the Rose Canyon station. The challenges with this is when you try to plot these before the road systems are in, you can't always see it. But you can generally see that all you need is a few roads punched in and you're going to get into that space. So we're confident with that. And we're also working on some predictive software that will allow us to lay that in, to make that fit. Obviously, the conversation about the Olympia Hills area, we added that to this map to kind of show where that fits. Pretty confident that that new 103 station with the road system punched in would allow us to embrace that into a 4-minute target. Because whether that property remains unincorporated or comes into Harriman, it becomes an issue for us to manage. And if that's a target, that's going to be something we'll look at hard. But that new plan will help us to fit that in there. So you can see how this Rose Canyon Station is going to make a great improvement as that road system develops. It's going to fill out that northern section that drops back down. All it needs is a couple of roads. Our biggest problem, as Councilman Smith knows, is golf courses create total havoc for us because we can't go through them. We end up having to go around them.
You can, it's just not advised.
And airports, you know, small ones can sometimes create challenges for us. So sometimes even in a really well-covered area, you end up with these little holes that you can't wrap around to. You can't reach into. But beyond that, our target will make that fit into making that coverage. That coverage map 2 is going to be a much more appealing map as Harriman grows. And I think as we watch that closely, we are going to see a higher percentage of calls outside of the 4-minute. We're going to see population. Tolson is our strategic data manager. We took a GIS position and bumped it up. He's a direct report to me and part of command staff because data is essential for us to make the best decisions. A lot of this is his doing, getting this captured, these maps, these targets. But part of his job description becomes predictive modeling. And that predictive work is going to require him to reach out to some software that is much more robust than what we're currently using, just looking retrospectively. That type of software is going to help us a lot in making sure that we land in proper places for those stations. In addition, once you have the footprint, we can start predicting the choke points of different road systems and the problems that might come with that, because as population increases, the drive time shrinks. You can't reach the 4 minutes. And so some larger cities are finding what worked great 15 years ago, now having to go in and infill between areas to get to that 4-minute target because they can no longer move across the city. At 3 a.m. it's fine, but at 3 in the afternoon it's not.
So Chief, if you don't mind, as we're talking about this, and I think this might just be we were focusing on the Rose Canyon Road Station, but as I look at 123, we've got some areas right next to 123 that don't appear to be included.
Because there's no roads.
And well, some of those, is it simply just we're waiting for the growth? And because some of the roads are already there, it wasn't the primary focus of this particular map. I just want to make sure there's not a concern we need to be aware of.
It is part of it, and those areas are part of where Tolson speaks to. And maybe what I can do is have him talk a little bit about the maps, how far behind some of the GIS mapping is compared to the planning.
That's yeah, if that's what's going on, that I think is fine. I just wanted to make sure there's not something we need to start looking at now.
Well, what we'll be in a position to help you with, honestly, and it'll be through Tolson's work on predictive, we will spot those, we'll figure out where the problem is, and then talk about a road system that might change.
Fantastic.
And that helps us immensely in getting once you pierce it, everything out there changes. So you can see an example of that is when you look at 123, when it runs down that road, how long that goes. So once you get into a zone, you can branch out a little bit, and you can get into those areas a little bit easier.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Absolutely. If I could make just a couple of comments. Most of this data that you've presented to us tonight, Chief, is a direct result of some of the questions that I asked, obviously, when Chief Pilgrim presented a couple weeks ago, and that was those questions were asked in a vein of, as we look forward, I believe that some of this information would be helpful, not only for understanding on our part as a council, but for an education piece also for our residents. So the responsiveness by you and your agency to provide this already is much appreciated, and I think it's been very, very valuable to add in as part of the conversation and part of the report that Chief Pilgrim gave a couple of weeks ago. And it's great data. It's very much appreciated, so I appreciate that. I will say that I've had the opportunity over the past 18 months to work on a professional level with Chief Peterson, and a very fine man. I've got to know him a little bit, obviously in that realm, and appreciate the professionalism which he has brought to the fire service in the valley, to the leadership he's given to UFA, because I am seeing great things that are happening as part of UFA, and also to his commitment to transparency from that organization, and that is much appreciated. Most people know that UFA is an organization that's near and dear to my heart. It's full of people that are near and dear to my heart as well, some of which are here tonight with Dusty and Brian, who I had the opportunity to work with for several years actually out in this area. And it's an organization that obviously, as we're aware, has been through some struggles and some trials, which is why we have Chief Peterson at the helm of that organization now to take it in a different direction, in a new direction. And all of this is demonstration to that new direction, and it's much appreciated. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to have this dialogue, to have this information, because I think, again, I ask those questions in a vein of responsibility in this position to my constituents that live out here, but I think it provides a great opportunity, as we've already talked about transparency from your organization. And I just want to say thank you once again for the work that you and your staff have done. I know Towson well, to be able to provide this data, some of which obviously we haven't had the opportunity to see before. And for me, again, having experience in the public safety realm, was eye-opening in some respects to see where we're at, and to look at that future of where we're going, and how, as a community and as a council, we can best prepare for that. And we see that we have some good plans in place, but we have some challenges that we still need to address. And working together, I think that we can continue to do that and provide a great service for the residents of Harriman. So thank you very much for your time.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Ditto.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. And be careful what you ask for, because we're excited to share the work that we're doing.
We are all about transparency here, and so the quick nature, as Clint said, was extremely appreciated.
Well, we have some pretty phenomenal people working in the UFA, and it's wonderful to share that in the city of Harriman. And I've really enjoyed getting to know Brett. Been very helpful, and Nicole representing you on the governance, pretty sharp. Really helpful to have those eyes on what we're trying to accomplish.
Fiery.
Thank you, Chief. We appreciate that.
I'm looking forward to the additional data that you talked about in the other programs. I think
I'm excited for that.
That'll be very interesting.
We do a Friday morning onboarding that's run through, and they can't move quick enough for me, because it's gonna. I already know what it can do, and the ability for all of us to look at this. We're going to find wonderful solutions.
Well, and I think it all goes back to the same goal of protecting the public.
Absolutely.
Whether it's their car or home on fire or their lives. So we appreciate all that you've done. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. We will move on to item 4.4, Harriman Police Department update. Chief Troy Carr with the Harriman Police Department.
Apparently I have 120 words or less. Is that right? We won't get it done in that.
16.
All right.
Pictures, Chief, pictures.
Give me just a second here. I was so enamored by the fire report, I was online watching it. So they've left. Okay.
They're already out the door.
I don't,
You managed to vacate the entire room.
I did. That happens apparently. So, well, they brought a pamphlet. We brought you a police car,
Ooh, he just threw it down there, Clint.
And
down.
mic drop.
right? So
And they were gorgeous police cars, by the way.
they were. Thank you, and we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that. Just really quick, though, I wanted to speak, and I wish Mayor Crane were still here. So, and I'll struggle through this a little bit. 16 years ago, I came out here to work as an officer, and I remember sitting in the waiting room. I talked to Brett, and I remember sitting waiting to meet Mayor Crane. And I sat out there, like I said, as a young deputy sheriff at the time. We had 2 patrol shifts and a flip phone, and a Ford Explorer that we changed out. And I remember sitting in the waiting room thinking, I hope he gives me a chance to work out here. Because, as I would learn, I'm here for one reason: I love this city. And I know we've shared that a lot. I absolutely love working here. I haven't slept much in the last 4 years since I returned as the executive officer. And it wasn't because I'm stressed out. It was because I love to get up and work in the morning. It has been a lot different for me since I left sex crimes to go not one night without thinking, it's 5 o'clock, I got to get up and go to work. And so I wanted to impart that, and I do wish the mayor had been here. How much he's been a part of my life, and how much Harriman has, and how much I love being here, and how much I love the opportunity that you guys have given me to be here and to bring you a new police department. So with that, let's lead off. And please interrupt me as we go through this, and let me know if you have any questions. We started a couple weeks ago hiring, you know that. The command staff is in place. What's becoming really exciting is that we're going to start with our civilian staff here pretty soon. So we're going to get an executive assistant. It's posted. We had over 100 people apply for the executive assistant. We posted the grandma specialist, and I believe there was close to 30 or 40 people. The reason why, that's a little bit more entailed job. It's very, very specific with a very, very specific set of skills that it requires. But we've had some great candidates put in for that. And crossing guards are coming next. So that's exciting. We're going to work out a plan on how that works as we transition to the school year, but that's happening. So from home, as those folks are watching, we want to make sure that we capture everybody. We've reached out to everybody. We haven't heard from some, so we want to make sure we capture that entire group and get them moved over to the Harriman Police Department, because they are truly one of the most critical pieces as we walk our children to and from schools. To follow, we'll do forensic specialist, we'll do an armorer, which will be an officer, but we'll post specifically for that skill set, and then sergeants and officers. So when we get to officers on September 17th, that's when we'll onboard them, and that's when we begin. 2 weeks later, we'll launch. All job descriptions have been posted with internal assignments, and that's quite a task, believe it or not, we've undertaken. We have to go through and list specific abilities that one might have to be a sex crimes detective, a homicide detective, SWAT, search and rescue, canine. And, you know, big kudos to Brian Weidmer, who's gone through and done that. An incredible job. Let's talk a little bit about policy. Policy is going to be a big piece, and it is a consuming piece. We have entered into conversation with Lexipol, which some of you may know is a police-specific program. Most of it's operational. And again, we'll be talking about some of the financial policies that we'll have to go through, but most of that's going to be operational for law enforcement. Looks to be a very, very good piece to us. It will bring training hours to us, as well as it's good for our insurance. So these officers are going to be highly trained, and they end up getting daily bulletins is what happens, and they are forced to go through and read policy, which it can be a little dry at times. So.
They also do fire. They are not just police specific.
They are public safety, and I believe they're getting into security work too.
Yeah.
So they're expanding. And one of our locals, Ken Wallentine, an attorney and was with the Attorney General's office, is actually part of that program. So it's a good local piece for us. And instead of the old days where police officers had to watch state law very closely and sometimes miss it, when it was regarding law enforcement, they do that for us. They have a team of attorneys that sits through and sifts through state law and make sure that we're up to date on that. So a very good piece. Let's talk real quick about the seniority policy. That has been written and is ready for review by the city manager, and then of course will come to the council. That is a very, very important piece for it. It's a huge recruitment piece as well. what it does is it marries up those that are coming laterally to where they would fit in the Harriman step plan. Not only does that, it gives them the years that they may need for things like bidding. And so all of that will kind of come together with a whole bunch of tentacles and develop what will be the Harriman Police Department for eternity. It literally will begin the process of where these folks fit in the structure of the Harriman Police Department. So that's very exciting. It was quite a bit of work that Chief Reyes did for us. Let's talk real quick about the partners, MOUs, and interlocals. We're working with John Brims on this. We have to be part of the officer-involved critical incident team. That's, of course, a state law. We experienced that with the Llewellyn incident out here. And we're working with the district attorney. And what will happen ultimately is we'll marry up with one of the 3 pillar teams. So we'll have our detectives on that pillar team, one of them. And with that, the electronic prosecution piece that we need from the DA, they've accepted us as a law enforcement agency, and they have us on board in that system. So basically, if we arrest somebody, now we can enter the paperwork to prosecute them as well. So big piece there. We're working with local law enforcement area partners for things like SWAT and mutual aid. And where that becomes a key piece is we'll have some items that others won't, and they'll have some items that we won't initially. And so we'll, again, begin to work very closely with them as we continue down the road. Today, just today, right before I walked in to our first meeting, I met with Brian Weidmer, our lieutenant over investigations, and he's been at the State Crime Lab. Very good news. The State Crime Lab is very excited. They're getting us structured for our forensic training. All our officers will be going through a preliminary course, but the forensic specialists that we hire will get in depth with them. They also have a team that will come out and help us if we have a major critical incident, and they come out and walk us through the system with us. So we get to learn, and they get the opportunity to come out, which they don't. Most of the larger agencies have their own, so the state doesn't come out a lot in the local area. So for participants like us, it's a very good system. They like to come out and play, if you will. Okay, so branding, you saw it. What do you think? Amazing. Amazing. So I told John, I wished he were here. John, Tammy, help me out. La Follette? La Follette. What she said. He designed that at his desk, and amazingly so, with this program that he just moved around. It was kind of crazy. And we looked at that and went, that's an amazing piece of work, John, and put it on a truck. And so I got to tell you, that guy is amazing when it comes to graphic artists. I haven't seen anything like that before. And you'll notice the blue line. I'm kind of a blue line guy. There's a blue line on that truck. And right on the tailgate.
It's also black and white.
Yes, it's a black and white truck.
It's black and white.
Always wanted to drive a black and white truck. Drove a lot of green and gold things with the sheriff's office, never black and white. Also on the tailgate, you'll notice what it said.
Harriman.
We are Harriman. Right? And I thought a lot about the...
It's covered up. On the front, it says Ford.
Yeah. We had to change the font a little bit because of those darn Fords. A bunch of, yeah.
Just oddly shaped.
Oddly shaped, yeah.
But they're beautiful.
We talked a lot about what message we wanted to send to our citizens, and we looked at a lot of our partners in the area and what messages they had to send. And it just came down to, we love the city. We're Harriman. So that's what we put on the back of our trucks. Seemed to be pretty simple. We have some shoulder patches in. A little bit of a color issue, so we're going to rerun those, but we'll get those out quick. That'll be for our Class B uniform. But what you saw today was what we call the Class C. It's a utility uniform. It will be on the 4 of us for the next several days. So you will see that the Harriman Police Department has a presence, a uniformed presence at the Fort Harriman Days events. Any questions on any of that?
You guys are going to be at the parade, right?
We will be in the parade.
Looking forward to everyone getting to see
We're
it.
right behind the council, so that...
So earplugs.
Earplugs, maybe. Yeah, we've got to show off those loud sirens.
Staff, if we can make sure we have earplugs available for all of those in front of the police vehicles.
Right?
And water guns.
And
Right.
water guns.
And the badges are, we talked about this last time, badges are in order. That's probably one of our biggest time items is trying to get badges in, so we're still probably 8 weeks out on those. But they look good. They look really good. You're going to like those quite a bit. Today, Brett and I were coming back from a meeting, and we were coming up to Mountain View Corridor, and down Mountain View Corridor came these 2 really cool-looking trucks. And he looks at those and goes, those are fantastic-looking police cars. I said, I'm glad you like them. They're yours. They were driving them back from the shop. They were driving them back from the shop today.
We were, we're down on 5400 South, coming out of Beck. We just barely left Beck and Valley Emergency Communication Center for the public, but we're looking at those going, wow, those really stand out. That really looks like a cop vehicle. And I said, wow, I can't believe he just let me eat this up. He goes, they're yours. I went, really?
So 2 takeaways. Brett needs his eyes checked a little bit.
And, yeah.
And 2, we have a fantastic team that designed a fantastic looking
Yeah.
vehicle.
And if I might add to that, 3, I'm glad I was driving, apparently.
Will you, just real quick on the vehicle, will you specify maybe a couple of things you did for officer safety?
Sure. So we spent quite a time down at Premier. One of the things they brought to our attention was the importance of officer safety when it comes to building a vehicle. And not only that, the kind of the ergonomics of the vehicle itself, and to make it is their office. They're in it for 10 hours a day, and so we wanted to make it comfortable and safe. One of the things that we haven't experienced before is a different siren system. The ones that were being used by UPD only projected about 700 feet, which isn't that far when you're coming up on an intersection at 30 or 40 miles an hour. We doubled that projection distance to about 1,400 feet with those sirens. That's what you heard today.
Felt like it.
Yeah, you can feel the difference. We didn't put the growler systems in them that the fire department has, which has been proven to create quite a stir at 3 o'clock in the morning as the bed rumbles around, you know what I mean? When those big rigs come through. But as far as that goes, the truck, we've also put, you'll notice when we open the door, there's a light embedded in the door. So when the officer opens the door into traffic, that light will let cars approaching know that there's an object in the way. We are able to dim the lights so that at night, if we're on an extended stop, we can turn those down. It really is distracting if you're pulling up to some of these police cars that have too many lights on them. It's a distracting piece. What we also did with all of the LEDs were make them a red, white, and blue so that the officers can use their red, white, and blues. They can turn it to just white and use them as what we call as a takedown. So they can clearly illuminate a scene very well, by the way. So it's kind of some of the things that we put inside but helped them with ergonomics was the panel. Did you see where the radio and lights were? In the old trucks, they're up here and the computer sits on top of them. They couldn't see, so what they were doing was taking their eyes off the road and moving computers around to see what they were doing. We don't want that. So what we've done is put a vertical space in there that they can reach down and see their radios and the computers. Quite a nice mount. It is very hard to sit in your car and type like this, so we made the mount so that it can come in front of the officer and he can type. So, and they are airbag compliant. So, our trucks to come in the future will have cages in them. The sergeants, you'll notice those trucks tonight were sergeants. We call them slick tops because they don't have lights on top for the supervisors. But we had to put in side marking lights. And in some of the other cars, they put little tiny LEDs down the windows. What we decided to do in this was give a much better intersection clearance capability, and we ran those strip lights down the side to get everybody's attention. You might ask why we have 4 trucks if we're taking what UPD has to give us and just transferring over. It's because we were able to put on 5 more officers. So we have to order more cars for that amount of money. So you will see a larger police force for what we have. Any questions? Did that kind of cover it on the cars? Okay.
Sorry, I just want to make a quick comment on the cars and acknowledge Monty and his team for getting these ready so quickly.
Yeah, Monty is here, and Monty's team, and thank you.
They're going to be the ones that maintain them and keep us in good shape. And
Monty's team actually are the reason those trucks were even here today. We didn't even think we'd have them for the parade, and Monty did some finagling to get them here today.
Trading, if you will.
Which also means we can get them in touch-a-truck for the event. We can get them by our booth, and we'll also have them in the parade. So thanks again, Monty, for everything you and your team did, and Justin, awesome.
Our public will be very thankful come this weekend.
Yeah, and they're getting, they'll learn what running a police fleet's like. It's the fire trucks and the police trucks take some abuse. So anyway, thank you for that, Councilman. We went to a finance committee meeting, Councilman Smith and I did, and it looks like the information we took from that and some of the information that Councilman Henderson will get tomorrow, it looks like we're in a very good place as our conversation moves forward about how we're going to transition equipment. And it looks like right now we're in a good place. So we'll see as that progresses tomorrow. What we've asked for is a 3-tiered transfer of property, and that being immediately those that aren't that equipment that isn't being used be transferred over. the others before our launch date, and then of course we'll have some of the fund balance financial talks later in that year. So does that kind of encapsulate it as well as we need to there? More to come on that, I think, as this month progresses. State and federal requirements, we're going to go through a BCI and UCGIS association where we are allowed to use the computer basically to get into the state records. Part of that has to do with Alan's team and the FBI coming here to make sure that we're secure. So, and if I know Alan, we're probably more secure than they are at this point. And that will progress through this next month too. But just know that there's a lot of work in technology that's going on behind the scenes with Alan's team, and we're working that very well. You might have heard that there was a little bit of a conversation with Sojo about getting onto their server, and then VEC kind of came through for us. What we didn't recognize is they were having a conversation in the background saying, no, we're going to bring you on board over here. So that's really what's happening behind that whole conversation. It's a very good thing for us, and it expedites our process quite a bit. So
I would just like to take a moment to thank South Jordan and their department for their willingness to be a partner in this. Even though we may not go with that specific route, it's a big sign to us as a city council and hopefully to our department that we will continue to be partners, even though we will have different names on the side of our trucks.
Yes, and thank you. They opened their arms to us and met with us immediately and said whatever they need to do to help us out, and they meant it. And as it turns out, VEC again looks like a better option for us. We were already creating a VPN tunnel to them, and it just went that route. But they were ready to help us, and they really did drop everything to come to our aid when they knew our timeline. So very impressive city, very impressive management down there. So they were very ready to help. With the VEC with the VEC participation, we will be doing dispatch manuals and those kind of things we expect from our dispatcher on that channel to know about our agency that are specific to us. And then we're going to have to enter into doing some record rotation, some other stuff that's kind of some usual business that we need to take care of. You might have seen a table out in the parking lot with a bunch of guns on it. I know the mayor did. What was happening there, ProForce came to us. They're one of our vendors here in the state, and they bring out weaponry that police often use, some of it less lethal, some of it lethal. We will be speaking with them in different areas of weaponry that we will utilize. And the less lethal are things like beanbags and tasers and those kind of things that we'll need now and in the future, and the systems that we need to maintain them, so extra batteries and software to download.
Will all of our patrol officers be issued non-lethal equipment as well as their lethal equipment?
Yes. So all of the officers will carry at least one non-lethal or less lethal form, and that will be in the form of a taser typically, but also OC spray. We will have in the sergeant's cars some different less lethal items that come in the form of beanbags that come out of a weapon that it can either shoot a 12 gauge or a 40 millimeter. So we'll have some of those options if it were needed.
But our officers will always have the option to go a less lethal route.
Yes.
To whatever it's called, de-escalate the situation.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of our key components to training when it comes to weapon systems is the de-escalation verbally. That's your first thing. That we want to have a conversation so that it doesn't result in even less lethal force. Really, the idea is that everybody goes home very safe. So on their belt, those in uniform will typically have 2 forms of less lethal and 1 form of lethal on their belt. So, and they'll be trained in that, of course, as we spin up over that 2-week process. Additionally to that, as part of our training systems, we'll be going through arrest control techniques. You'll hear that ACT. They'll have mats down and be rolling around in the room. So if you guys want to come and watch that, you're more than welcome. And we'll also be working on another key component. That is evidence storage. And evidence storage is kind of a tricky beast. It is one of those things that makes or breaks a police department can end up in the news. We don't want to be in the news. So we are taking very active steps right now to make sure we're very efficient with the way we're going to handle that. Currently, we'll have a system here locally in the building that will manage most of it. Some of our off-storage sites will be non-critical stuff like found property, found bicycles, and those kind of things. So just know that that'll be taking place. You'll see safes and metal and stuff coming in and out of the building, and that's what that's for, is to create it was to develop that system. And then lastly, we went with body cams. So you know, I'm a body cam guy. I think they're great. There are a lot of officers that don't think that, strangely enough. But what we've experienced is it's not so much that it prevents a problem, but I think it makes everybody act on their best behavior once they know they're being recorded. So as far as a de-escalation, that could be one of our main priorities as far as the camera goes. So we'll be taking those steps to utilize body cameras on everybody all the time, as far as uniformed officers. Of course, the guys in the office won't have them. So that kind of wraps up what we've been doing. It's like I've said before, it's kind of a flat perspective of what's happening, but if you get a chance to come up and see the guys running around the floor, they literally are running around the floor right now. So any questions for me on where we're at right now, where we're going? I think.
No, if you would just express our appreciation to our 4 current officers, including yourself, on just the amazing work that's being done, and what we're all excited to see what this is becoming, and I personally am excited to
first glimpse today.
Show you guys off in the parade. So
yeah. So and I think for our next report, we'll know quite a bit more about what's happening. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We appreciate it.
Work.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to our consent agenda. We do need to make a slight adjustment with 5.5 since that's no longer necessary. So if you make sure whoever makes the motion to include that in the motion as well.
I just have a quick question. I believe that there was a item on the, the minutes that has been corrected, correct? I just didn't get an updated one. There was that had Nicole listed as out of town, but chairing the meeting as well. So I wanted to make sure that we. You are very talented that way, for sure. But wanted to make sure that we had the minutes correct. And as long as that has been corrected, then I have no other issues.
To that effect, Mayor, I'll make a motion. Motion to approve the consent agenda with the deletion of 5.5.
I will second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Jared?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. That motion passes. All right, we will move on to item 6.1. Discussion and consideration of an ordinance to adopt the final budget, making appropriations for the support of Harriman City for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018 and ending June 30th, 2019, and determining the tax rate and levying taxes upon all real and personal property within Harriman City.
Okay, first of all, I think I deserve one of those black and white trucks.
I second that motion.
Okay, we've gone through the process of the budget, and we had our public hearing 2 weeks ago. The public has had the budget for a month now. The council's had it for over 2 months now. We've gone through all of the legal process. Today is our statutory date that it needs to be approved. So we ask that you approve the budget plus the addendum which has been provided, which will cover the police department for the short term. Also, this sets our tax rate for the coming year at 0.000307, which means that we collect 30.7 cents per thousand of a household house value.
And that is to collect the same amount that we collected in
That drops the rate from 0.000326 last year. So last year we got 32.6 cents per thousand. We're at 30.7 this year, but that's to account for the increase in values. Theoretically, it should keep the homeowners' taxes the same. This is the rate that's established by the State Tax Commission so that that we get the same amount of revenue year after year, regardless of what the values of the homes do.
And Alan, just to be clear, in terms of the tentative budget that was approved and has been put out there for the public to be able to see online and view, there have essentially been no changes to that tentative budget from then to what we have as a final budget before us tonight, correct?
Only that addendum that covers the police. Nothing else has changed.
Okay.
We have gone from start to finish with the same budget we
Same budget.
started.
Well, and I think that's a testament to the good work that has been done by yourself, the rest of the finance department, obviously our communications department. Again, I think we've been through a very transparent, a very robust, and a very complete budgeting process this year that has given the opportunity to be very well understood by our residents. For those that have taken the time to view it, again, I think it's very easy understood. And the fact that we are here now tonight with a budget before us for final adoption, again, that has had essentially no changes or very, very minor changes to it, again, is I think a testament to the quality of staff that we have at the city, and much thanks to you.
Any further discussion by the council? With that, I will accept a motion, keeping in mind that we've been asked to make sure we specifically include the addendum as provided.
I will make a motion to approve ordinance number 2018-23, adopting a final budget, making appropriations for the support of Herman City for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2018, and ending June 30th, 2019, and determining the rate of tax and levying taxes upon all real and personal property within Herman City to be set at .000307, to include the addendum for fiscal responsibility for our new police department as well.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Nicole?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. We have money for next year. Yay. Okay.
We don't have to shut down the government.
We don't do that because we're responsible. All right. We will move on to item 6.2, discussion and consideration of a resolution supporting the House Bill 362 from 2015, authorized 0.25 local cooperation general sales tax dedicated to transportation, and encouraging Salt Lake County to impose the tax as outlined in Senate Bill 136 from 2018. Gordon.
All right. I'll be really brief, and then we'll be introducing Lanice to come in and talk and answer questions that the council may have. I wanted to let you know I emailed a list to Jackie, and we can put that up, that list on the board. These are the capital project roads that we would anticipate being eligible for this funds. This represents tens of millions of dollars. Also, we have in there the anticipated transit lines, not including any of the bus service that we'd get, and that represents hundreds of millions of dollars if we're going to get any of those built for our community. So I'm just giving you some information that you'd asked for in the work meeting. As you know, this, regardless of how you vote tonight, the tax has passed. It's going to happen. What we do need to think about is, and we can see this in some of the communities that haven't voted, they're very interested in what we do tonight. And I think the key thing that we want to think about is the tax is going to happen to the residents tonight. We just want to make sure that those funds, some of those funds, are able to make it to Harriman. And I do not believe there will be any criteria that will check off, did your community vote for this or not? However, I believe that if all things are equal in various projects, that due to human nature and the discussion of, and basically it's going to be the mayors and the council people that will be making these decisions, they'll look at that, and I think it will be something that will be thought about. So as we think about getting money for our community, like I said, regardless of what you do tonight, our residents are going to be taxed with this tax at this point. So I'm going to have Lanice come in and, oh, there she is, answer any questions you have.
Very much. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. It's nice to be here. Lanice Davenport, Government Relations Manager with the Wasatch Front Regional Council. I'm happy to be here to talk about the local option sales taxes for transportation as highlighted in Senate Bill 136. I think, well, as you want to make it clear up front that I'm not here to advocate for or against the local option sales taxes, rather provide information to you and try to answer any questions that I can. to help you so that you have enough information to make this decision. I realize that Harriman City is a very, very fast-growing city. It's a special community. I was witness to that really cool tribute you gave to Mayor Crane, and it just reminds me that you have a very cool city here, and I, of course, realize that there's a lot of challenges in making sure that you're making the right decisions and planning, and anyway, here to try to help with those decisions. Okay, so the local option sales taxes are also known as the quarters. They're referred to the quarters because they basically make up they're 0.25% for each quarter. So for example, the first quarter is a 0.25%, the second quarter is 0.25%, and there's 4 that are available. Salt Lake County has already imposed 3 of the 4 quarters, and we had before us up until yesterday the opportunity to impose the 4th quarter local option sales tax. This is also known as Proposition 1, Prop 1. It was basically made available to us in 2015 through House Bill 362. It did not pass at that time. The state legislature allowed the cities and county to reconsider passing the local option sales taxes. One of the main reasons that we had heard that the tax did not pass originally was some issues with our local transit district. And the state legislature made quite a few revisions to the governance of UTA, and we believe that they believe that most of those governance revisions will play to the benefit of our valley. So the 4th quarter local option sales tax, again, is a 0.25%. It was passed in 2015, updated with the Senate Bill 136 in 2018. The money can go for roads and transit projects. And just yesterday with Sandy City and Draper City, the resolution passing in both of those cities, Salt Lake County did reach their 67% supermajority threshold that they had asked in order to support their imposition of the 4th quarter. Basically what this means is beginning October 1st of 2018, this 0.25% will come into play, and Salt Lake County receives 100% of the revenue through June 30th of 2019. So it's 8 months of revenue that the county will receive. Senate Bill 136 does provide in statute that that revenue is distributed in a certain manner. Half of it will go to regionally significant projects, and the other half will pay down debt that the county currently has. After July 1st of 2019, the regular distribution comes into play on that quarter, which means 0.10 will go to the cities. Harriman City can expect to receive about $376,000 a year. Other cities will receive, their 0.10%. The transit district will get 0.10 as well, and then the county will get a 0.05, giving us that total 0.25%. So let's talk about the types of projects that can be funded. It's important to know that this is a flexible funding for roads and transit, as I mentioned. So I'm just going to list the types of projects. And keep in mind that when I say transportation projects, this does include road, transit, as well as active transportation, which are bike and pedestrians, pathways or trails, things like that. So you can construct new roads. This is highways, collectors, arterials. This does include B and C roads, so your local roads are eligible for this funding. You can enhance existing roads. You can widen roads. You can construct active transportation, as mentioned, such as bike and pedestrian paths or projects. Maintenance and upkeep of existing roads, enhanced transit service, improvements to bus stops and shelters, expand hours and frequency of transit service. And then lastly, but also importantly, cities can partner with neighboring cities, the county and/or UTA, to improve regionally significant new transportation facilities. So I'm saying regionally significant projects a lot. I don't have a specific definition on me, but I think it's fair to say that basically, any kind of major highway or road where residents are, no matter their origin or destination, they're traveling on that road, that's really considered a regionally significant project, and it does include those items that I just listed. And I think that's all I have, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you might have for me.
I guess I do have one question for you. on your handout, you put that UTA worked with Utah County to improve a bunch of things down there. Did we see a significant increase in the rider numbers there?
I'm sorry, can you, I didn't
Was
hear
there a
that.
significant increase in rider numbers?
In the ridership numbers from what?
For UTA and Utah County? You just put on your handout that because of Prop 1, UTA's worked with the local communities to enhance things there. Have the enhancements brought any benefit? Is ridership numbers up?
So the fourth quarter has not passed in Utah County. They also have they have the decision to make to consider imposing it in their county as well. So
I'm sorry. It says voters approved Prop 1 in Davis and Weber counties. Sorry, not Utah County.
Okay.
Davis and Weber counties. Have you seen significant increase in ridership?
Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that. I wish UTA was here to be able to answer that
Sorry,
question. That's
sure.
okay, but I will say, which brings a good point, the two counties that have already imposed this tax have stated that they have a really, really good relationship with UTA. And when it comes to deciding how UTA spends that 0.10 that they receive, they have already they've admitted it or told us or explained that they're going to basically work with the jurisdictions to make sure that they understand what your priorities are, and then develop a system around that for all of the local governments, so that there's a regional system that makes sense for everybody. So your voice will be heard in the UTA process as well.
Thank you.
You've mentioned, again, the term regionally significant, projects. And though we know that there's not really a very clear definition of what that means, could you just clarify? I believe it is, at least at this point, the intent that the money that goes to the county in this first 9 months of collection, and then that 0.05 that continues to funnel to the county, should this pass beyond that, those funds would become available through a competitive process to communities to, again, try and fund these, what are, deemed regionally significant projects. So in theory, should this pass, a community will get the portion that is directly attributed to them, but then they have the opportunity to potentially compete for more if, in fact, that is the process that the county decides to follow, though that is not set in stone. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. Yes, Salt Lake County is expected to receive about $12 to $14 million, and have stated that they will consider a process where a committee is created, and it will include local government representatives outside of Salt Lake County representation, so that they can award projects in a competitive manner. And this obviously would be able to fund larger projects.
Okay.
Thank you. That's good clarification.
Are there any further questions for Lenise at this time? Okay. We'll go ahead and have some discussion by council. Thank you for your presentation, and if you'll just hang out for a few minutes, we may call you out for some additional questions as we have a conversation.
Thanks, Mayor.
All right. Discussion among council.
Maybe I'll start for just a minute. I brought up my concerns during the work meeting, or maybe it's more appropriate to say my questions. So, thank you. One of those to me was defining the regionally significant projects, because as I mentioned in the work meeting, as we look to vet this, knowing of course that it's important to note that this tax is moving forward, that they did in fact reach a threshold. And so my focus then shifts away from the tax at this point, because our decision doesn't change the fact that our residents are now committed to participating in that tax. So my focus shifts to making sure one of two things: that one, as much of our taxpayer dollars that are going out can come back to our city, being one of the fastest growing communities, and knowing that the state has growth needs that are significant, and we of course have land, as do our west side neighbors, that as much of our taxpayer dollars as can come back to meet those needs, not only our local but also state. And then secondly, as was alluded to by our assistant city manager, that we're not penalized in any way, shape, or form by not participating in this. And maybe I'll add a third. no one can question the fact that transportation funding is needed. One has merely to look at maintenance needs and how you really never get a handle on maintenance needs. The problem just gets worse and worse. So I, in good conscience, cannot possibly turn down transportation money that I know is needed, not only for maintenance, but for all of the projects that you listed. As a growing community, we have a need for every single one of those that you listed. You know, of course, roads are eligible, you mentioned, and it was important to me that you mentioned local roads. You know, the BNC are included in that. Active transportation, we have a very active community that likes our trail system, wants to ride bikes, all of those things. Maintenance, I've mentioned. The possibility of extending the transit line for all of the regionally significant attractions that we've put in here. We've determined that that is a way to bring people into our community and generate sales tax. And so to enable that, we have of course, the Real Training Facility. We have other regionally significant areas that we are looking, or options that we are looking to bring into our city. So transit becomes a possible way to bring them into our city and, more importantly, get them off the roads. I would mention that I still have a huge concern about east and west corridors and how lacking they are. One has only to, and I would invite anyone to come out and travel on our two primary east and west, 126th and 134th, and realize how inadequate they are already, which is very frightening when you look at, you know, what we've dealt with Olympia Hills and any other development, frankly, that will really make the quality of life decline dramatically, and none of that is appropriate. I don't mean to keep looking at you. I feel like there's no one else to look at out there. I feel like I'm almost pointing a finger. I'm going to look over here.
I'm sure Justin can come
just
sit up front.
You can look at the blue light on the camera.
I don't know why. I feel like I need to look at somebody. It's not you. It's not you. But no, east and west is a huge concern, and I know it's not escaping the attention of our MPO. It's not escaping the attention of the legislature and, of course, the county. But for those that live it every day, it's very frustrating. And so, again, I go back to just the necessity of transportation. So those are kind of my issues that I brought up during work meeting. I appreciate the enlightenment on much of that and look forward to the fact that the tax is going to pass. We will appreciate the money that we will get according to our population. And without a doubt, we have a number of regionally significant projects that I feel would rise to the top. We're one to look at growth needs and priority. So that's what I'll say for now.
Okay, I'll take my turn. Obviously, when we deal with anything related to taxes, those are probably some of the most difficult decisions that we would be asked to make in our current positions. That being said, we are put here to make difficult decisions as well. And I'll go back to what was said about Mayor Crane as he was here earlier, and that his motto really is that he was always going to make a decision that was whatever was best for Harriman. And I approach things really much in the same way. The position I'm in, obviously we have stewardship over our community and a responsibility to make decisions that will best enhance or look out for our community moving forward. And this is a difficult decision for sure. There's many, in my mind, there's many arguments on both sides of this issue and potential benefits and to our community, but also it comes at a cost, as it always does. So it is a difficult decision and one that personally I have not taken lightly at all. I've spent an amazing amount of time on this particular issue. It seems like we say that about all the issues that come before this body because they are all very, very important. But this one certainly has not been without a lot of discussion and public scrutiny and public concern as well as we talk about taxes. But I've spent a lot of time doing my own research on it, having conversations with the public, with other elected officials, with representatives from UTA to try and make sure that I have all of the information and all the data needed to make a decision that, again, is best for Harriman moving forward. One of the things that in this position that I have constantly expressed to me is the transportation issues that are currently facing our community. The need for additional infrastructure, the need for more transit options within our community as we continue to see the southwest quadrant of the valley with rapid growth and development. This issue was also accentuated again as we dealt with the Olympia Hills issue last week. And during that town hall meeting, I don't know that there was nearly anybody that came up and expressed public comment that night that didn't talk about concerns over transportation. And I think that that is very, very relevant, obviously, to this conversation and this discussion over this matter right now. Again, we need more transit options out here, and I'll talk about that piece here in just a little bit more in a minute. You know, there's also been discussion based on the language in the bill. You know, if we deferred or didn't support this vote and it didn't pass, which again we know that threshold has been met, but that there's an opportunity for the community to get more of that pie if we were to enact it ourselves as provided by the language in there in a couple of years. And while that may be the case, obviously we haven't had an opportunity to really, that would be enacted on a local level and not a county level. And so I question again whether we would get as much as a community, how that breakdown would come. But really what that would do is that would create an opportunity if we did defer and chose to enact that, to where we were really looking at the transportation issues that are facing our whole county, but again, the southwest quadrant, really in a patchwork framework, to where it's maybe we enact it, maybe Riverton doesn't, maybe South Jordan does, and now we're looking at it and we're not able to address it in a regional manner, which is the only way that that's going to work, in my opinion, for us, is to work on these regional issues. Again, the language has been used, regionally significant, and I believe that this is certainly a regional issue and one that we have to approach on a regional front. And I believe that this, at least at this point, provides a framework to potentially approach that on a regional concept. You know, we have to find a way to start addressing our transportation needs. We are continuing to fall further and further behind because we are struggling to find the funding to address those. You look at the list that's in front of us, which I know isn't even a complete list of the projects that we really need within our own community. These are the major ones, and we don't have the money internally to address even one of those completely currently. And so, again, I weigh the needs of our community and at least a start of a funding source to potentially start to address these. I don't think that this is a complete fix, but at least it's a potential start. Do I think it's a perfect solution? I don't think it's a perfect solution. I still have some concerns of my own over some of the process and implementation that it's went through, and even some of the distribution that potentially we can fix down the line. But again, it's a start of a significant issue that I believe that we are way behind on and we need to start addressing. You know, just by way of conversation, this was mentioned in the work meeting, the amount of money, which again isn't huge, but it is something to allow us to start addressing the issues within our community. To put that in perspective, if we were to try and raise that same amount by another means, for instance, a property tax increase internally, that would necessitate right now for us a 50% increase in our current property taxes to 5-0 to garner that same amount of funding that we could put towards it. And I obviously know that for me personally and for our residents that would never be acceptable. This is a tax increase in another form. It is more money out of their pockets. People will feel that, and I certainly recognize that.
But earmarked for transportation.
Thank you, but it is 100% earmarked for transportation. So for me, again, I believe that we need to look out for our community. I believe that this is a way to get some of those earmarked funds to be able to start addressing our issues. However, I do have some expectations, should we vote to support this, of how it's done moving forward. Again, we talked about the distribution and that though there's no solid language in there right now about what process that will go through and who will decide ultimately what those regionally, now I can't remember the language that they used. I've used it so much. Regionally significant, thank you, projects are, I believe that should be in some format, and I will ask as this goes back now to the county council to enact and to have in this first 9 months and then afterwards a smaller portion, I will ask that they implement a process to where there is a fair distribution of this money to these regionally significant projects. But the decisions of what is regionally significant is made by a core of regional people, not by one entity. Not one entity. This is a tax that is county-wide, and not one entity should have total control over the use or distribution of those funds. It needs to be a regional approach. The other expectation I would have is that as a result of providing more money specifically for transit, that we see in our community an increase in those transit options, be it rapid bus transit systems, an expansion of those, creation of those, whatever it may be, but also further work and planning in the extension of the light rail system, which we have worked very hard as a community to plan for, to dedicate land for, to set that aside, to allow for that expansion, and that is something that is going to be essential as we continue to grow in the south end of the valley. So that's my thoughts.
Going left to right.
Oh, I'm gonna let you guys go first.
Okay. So thank you for your comments, and I definitely respect them all. I guess first of all, for me, is just simply that this was presented to the voters in 2015, and they said no. Now, as our area said a loud no. Proposition failed by 1%, but not in our area. Harriman City said no. And so I find it very difficult to know that this went through the voter process, and the voters who we represent said no, we won't support that. My feeling is that part of the reason that they wouldn't support that is not because they don't want good roads. We all recognize and understand that there's a need for transportation money. I think that the biggest reason that that was rejected was because of the UTA component of it. There was significant problems in UTA. I do believe that the legislators are working very hard to correct those significant problems in UTA, but we have had zero knowledge of how well those changes are going to take place. I have no idea if that's going to be effective. UTA has been a problem for a long, long time. And just because we've made changes very recently doesn't mean that all of a sudden those problems are going to go away. I believe that when inherent problems go on for a long, long time, it takes a long, long time to fix it. And so even though there's language written into this bill, I believe UTA can't receive funding until July of 2019, I believe that, is that correct? I believe it's July of 2019. Very quickly, they will be able to receive funding from these taxes, and I have issues with that. I think that what should have happened is these taxes should have been separate. If we wanted to do a tax for transit, let's look at a tax for transit. If we need to do a tax for the other forms of transportation, then let's look at that. I personally believe that that's a lot of the reason that that was turned down by the voters, is it direct connection. A huge amount of this, 40% of this tax, is going to go to that entity. I don't recall what the new name is for it, but we will all know it as UTA, so that's where 40% of this tax will go. As was mentioned in our work meeting, there's a huge amount of ambiguity in this bill. It talks about transportation, but there's no nothing locking down exactly how that goes. There's statements by elected officials currently that, oh, we will do this and we'll make sure it goes here and we'll put it through this process. But there is nothing legally binding to make sure it goes through those processes, which I feel is not appropriate. we have no idea how any of that will play out. The process was described as very complicated when this was being presented to us. They're going to select through this regionally significant, they're going to select regionally significant projects, but they're going to have to go through a very complicated formula that nobody quite understands. Well, I have a hard time with that also. There's been much said about penalize, fear, intimidation. There's been all of those terms thrown around. And again, I feel like I am green at this. I understand that. But I just simply do not believe that that's the way we legislate, is to penalize cities for not supporting something that in actuality should not be on our desk. This resolution should not be before us. Salt Lake County is imposing this tax. Salt Lake County should be imposing the tax. It shouldn't be sent to the cities. Somebody has to have accountability for this. I can tell you, let me just look here really fast. Councilman Snellgrove, he did not vote for this. He was the no vote from the council. He used words like uncomfortable, uneasy. He said this was a method, a scheme put in place out of fear because they didn't feel like the county council would pass it, and or they were afraid that it would fail another vote. So those kind of things are very concerning to me. He says that getting this implemented with little, if any, accountability. So this method was created to hide accountability so no one can take responsibility for raising taxes. I just don't think that's an appropriate way to legislate. I think that there should be an accountability. If we as a city decide to raise property taxes, we're accountable for that. We have to be accountable to our residents and our voters. And I think the county council should have to have the same responsibility. If they want to raise taxes, they need to hold accountability for this. I believe that we should not be voting on this. I simply believe that we shouldn't have to take a stand on these things. The county council should have taken care of that. We talked about this quadrant and getting funding for regionally significant projects. There's no guarantee that this quadrant will get funding. This is a county-wide tax, and it's a pretty big county. So it's just there's so much uncertainty in this that I just simply think that we shouldn't be having to take a position on it. I think this legislation should have stood on its own merit at the county council, and it should not have been pushed to the cities because it is not us that's increasing the tax.
I could go on forever about this one, and we've had a lot of discussion individually over the last several days and weeks and even months. I remember sitting up on Capitol Hill at the League LPC meeting and having us briefed on this very bill, and I thought my initial reaction was that that's just dirty. That they would try to do an end around. I find it convenient that in every report that I've seen, whether it's the one in front of us tonight or others from other organizations, it's conveniently left out the point that the voters rejected this. And this is simply a way to get around that. To get someone's tax agenda done without any accountability. I don't think any of us, anyone, anywhere disagrees that we need transportation funding. But I just think this is the absolute wrong way to do it for so many reasons. I think it's important for residents to see. I mean, we were handed this sheet tonight showing the percentages because the requirement from the county was that they have said that they'll pass this if they receive 67% of the cities in the county expressing their support for it. So I know it's designed to show us where we're at. That threshold was met last night, which means it doesn't matter what we do tonight as far as this being passed or not. That part's inconsequential, which I'll come back to in a second. But I also see it kind of as a score sheet. It's interesting to go down this list and see that the cities that did not vote or voted no are all West Side cities. And they're all ones I've had conversations with. With
the exception of South Jordan.
Well, there's others that are on the west side. I'm just saying those that voted no or did not vote are all on the west side. And I think we would all agree that the west side is what's in the most dire need of help. And as I've talked with representatives from those areas, the consistent comment was the same thing: this is the wrong way to do it. This is putting the power in the hands of people that have consistently taken from the west side and given to the east side, and we see that kind of laying out before our eyes. So I could go on and on and on about everything, but I want to make a couple things clear to the residents who are watching or paying attention to this. One, this is not something that we have to vote on. This is something we're being asked to vote on by the county council. The process is that the state legislature has decided that they know better than the residents of Salt Lake County, and they want to impose this tax, but they didn't want to take responsibility for it, so they pushed it on to the county council. And the county council, and with the words that were used in that policy committee meeting up on Capitol Hill in January, February, was that the legislature added, quote, a sweetener for the county, which is that for the first 8 months, they will collect 100% of the proceeds, totaling, from what it looks like here, $40 million plus, that they get to decide what to use it on for regionally specific, significant, thank you, projects. But that's the only definition. What's regionally significant? What's the process? What's the method? There's no accountability whatsoever. It puts it in those hands. Well, if I was sitting on the county council, I'd say, well, how can we pass that up, or pass up the $12 to $13 million a year that we then have control over, that we can then use to do things that we want to do. But instead of taking, as Sherry put it, instead of taking accountability for that and passing it themselves, they tried to push it down to, what they've done is pushed it down to the cities and said, we want you to express support for this because the voters said no. Well, let's put the cities in the position of, well, if we don't vote for this, we're afraid of some reprisal, that our projects won't be prioritized, that this is a score sheet, that the other cities will be prioritized. Mayor McAdams and others have said publicly, well, that won't happen. But I've heard other conversations where tacitly it has absolutely been threatened, and fear-mongering of, if you don't go along with this, we absolutely will hold you accountable. Those that voted yes will be first on the list. So that's the situation that we're in. Unfortunately, we're at a point where the decision's been made by the other cities, have voted for it. It's my preference at this point to stick with what I've said from the beginning. For this type of resolution, to me, is just political. Whether it's for this, the school board bond, where the school district comes to us and asks us as a legislative body to express support for something that's on the ballot for them, I just think that that's not our place. It's not our place to vote on those issues. It's not our place to try to coerce residents to vote for something for these other areas. So I feel I have to be consistent in my position, whether it's this issue or others that come before us. It's not we shouldn't be entertaining these resolutions at all. They can ask us to vote on these things, but we don't have to. It's not our place. We shouldn't allow them to put us in these types of positions, and especially now where this decision's been made by others. There's no reason for us to vote on it other than a fear that we will be ignored when it comes to the doling out of this money.
Any further comments by any other members of the council? Okay, I do want to take a couple minutes here and express a couple of things. With that being said, I'll then at that point, if it will suit the council, accept a motion from this body on this particular item. We've had a lot of things that have come up in our city in the last 6 months as this council has sat here and tried to govern our city and govern in a way that provides the best and keeps the needs of our residents in mind at all times. I've heard a couple of things that have been mentioned a couple of times. One of the big things that I've heard mentioned several times is fear. Fear of what residents will say to us or whether or not we'll get reelected. Fear of reprisal And I'm willing to call it out for what it is. It's fear of reprisal, that if you don't do what we want, you will be punished. We've heard fear. I've also heard from legislators and from elected representatives that there should be no fear, that these things won't be held over us. Whether or not that's true, that's why we're here, is to make those hard decisions. But those thoughts of reprisal are heavy on all of our minds as we talk about this list. Right now, we see several cities, and as Councilman Henderson mentioned, several cities have chosen not to vote on this, simply as an indication that it doesn't look as bad as voting against it, because they are also scared of what type of reprisals will come down. As I look at this process and I look at what's gone on, I agree in so many ways with Councilwoman Orrin and Councilman Henderson. This is not the way this should have ever happened. The state code very specifically put this towards to the counties to make this decision, and benefited the counties very clearly for doing this. At the same time, it is designed to benefit cities as well, and so I think that there is some validity in, as a city, having some say in voicing support or opposition towards a particular tax increase, and I think we're all clear this is a tax increase. I have been reminded many, many times in the last several days by residents throughout the city who have made it clear to me that one of the things that I was very clear about in my stance as I ran for this office was that I wanted to help lower taxes. And I am committed to that. I think that was one of the larger driving factors in our decision to leave UPD and to start our own police force, was because we could see a tax savings that was real to our residents for a better product for what we were getting. That to me is an ongoing process that changes with every single decision that we make. It is also important, however, that we have roads that our police department can drive onto to get to where they need to go. It's also essential that our fire department has roads that they can put our big engines on and our tiller trucks to get to those communities that need to be served. We have several different options in front of us. We have the option to support the resolution as presented. We have the option to change the resolution as presented. And we have the option to propose an entirely new resolution or simply not act. I am not afraid to act. It is our job as elected officials to take a stand one way or another. And while it may not always be popular one way or another, I think that it is important for us to take and make our voice known when we are asked to do such. I also appreciate, however, the need to stay in our lane, as Councilman Henderson, I think, is trying to say, that maybe some of these things aren't for us to make a decision on. One of the roles as chair is I generally don't make motions, and so I might suggest that as a council, we add some language to the resolution that we are looking to, and something that I wrote up just fairly quickly and would ask our attorney to listen to as I read off.
Before you do, if I may, just maybe correct one thing you said about tax savings with leaving UPD. There will be no tax savings for leaving UPD. We will simply make sure that the tax money is used properly.
But it also means we will get better service for the same tax dollar instead of paying more. I appreciate that clarification, because you are absolutely correct. So as I read this, this is a suggestion. This would be a motion that I would, a motion for an alternate or amended resolution that I would hope that if the council sees fit to move forward on this item, that they might include some language such as this or similar to, and it would be to add a section 7, expected distribution of new funds. And that section would say, Harriman City supports that over time, the portion of this tax that is collected from Harriman residents for the county and transit district portion be fairly distributed back to the Harriman community in projects such as, but not limited to, new bus routes into Harriman City, bus rapid transit, tracks, front runner, new roads, expanded capacity or on current roads, and regionally significant projects such as those that are included with this resolution, which would be the list that we show on the table. And I'm actually going to hand this over to our recorder so she can see what I've typed up if she'd like to have that.
I'd be more in favor of making a stand and saying this isn't something we should be doing, but I believe Councilwoman Martin had brought up that point in our work meeting, and Councilman Smith had added to it. I think that the kind of the two things that they had talked about is, I think it's, if you all want to go there, is that we put in that there be a clear process laid out for how those things would be divvied out.
So, thank you, Councilman Henderson. So a couple of points to some of the comments. I don't disagree at all. In fact, I couldn't agree more that the two taxes of a transportation tax and a UTA tax ought to be separated. Should have been separated in 2015, probably would have passed. I wish that they were separate now. I don't like the process that we are in right now, having to put forward resolutions. So I agree with both of those points. That being said, it's the reality that we have in front of us, and it's done. The tax will be enacted, and so, you know, my focus then shifts to the areas that I said before, and waiting is not an option for me. Our roads will continue to deteriorate. We have new roads that are needed, new capital projects that are needed, and we don't have time to prevent us from completing those roads. All waiting does is ensure that congestion and traffic gets worse and worse, and it's already becoming unbearable as anybody who drives on that. I have every confidence that when you are looking at transportation needs and the growth of this state or this county, let's go a little bit smaller, the growth of this county is reliant on the land that exists on the west side. So common sense, if nothing else, tells me that we can't continue to meet the needs of a growing state without providing the necessary transportation to move them on this land that's on the west side. So I don't see how we will not benefit greatly from this, regardless of, you know, any kind of bullying tactics. I just simply think when those who are looking at transportation look at the places to put those, it's the west side. So you have to have that. So with that said, you know, I brought up a couple of things that were I to support this, I would absolutely want added to the resolution. Councilman Henderson pointed that out. So with that, I have just jotted down some, I think what would be my version of a new resolution. So I'll read that, and then perhaps we can decide if we like that and decide which way we want to go. So I will make a motion at this time. I will motion to approve resolution number R33-2018 supporting HB 362, 2015, authorized 0.25% local option general sales tax dedicated to transportation and this is where I'm going to change it a little bit, and acknowledging Salt Lake County has already met their required approval threshold as per SB 136, 2018, to impose the tax in 2018, now new language, reflecting our understanding per the bill and Salt Lake County's responsibility to formally outline the competitive and fair process for revenue distribution from year one and beyond, a detailed definition of regionally significant projects, and that final distribution decisions be made by a representative body of all cities contributing to funding. Lastly, the inclusion of an addendum outlining our high priority projects we see as meeting the definition of regionally significant and vital to not only our growth, but the state's growth as well.
I believe that is a motion. Do you have what you need for now? Okay, so I have a motion on the table.
I will second the motion with a comment.
So with that, just to make sure that we're in line with our rules and procedures, the comment that comes after the second would come after the vote. And so I will make sure that there is an opportunity for every member of the council to make a comment after the vote has been taken by the body. So with that, we have a motion and a second.
And I can read that again if desired, so that people know what they're voting on.
If at any part, does the council need that to be read again? No? Okay. We will go ahead and call for the vote. Nicole?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Sherry?
No.
And Jared?
No.
So I will vote yes. That motion does pass. With that, as I have indicated, I will go ahead and give time to the council to make comment on their vote, and we'll go ahead and start with Councilman Smith.
Brief comment. One, very well said in the motion. I think that did encapsulate a lot of the things that we discussed, and really how I think from our body, even those that voted no, I think an expectation that there needs to be clear language in this, and so I appreciated the clarification and the way that motion was phrased. My last comment really is just simply this. I sincerely appreciate every member of this council and the manner in which we are able to sit here and to discuss and to not agree on this, and the respect that we have for one another, and we're able to work with one another, which I know is not always the case in cities. And so I really do respect the fact, I respect the opinions of Councilwoman Norm and Councilman Henderson, and I respect your position on this. You have made some great points, and some of which I absolutely agree with. But I just really appreciate the manner in which this body conducts business, and the ability we have to disagree, but to do that in a professional manner.
And not be disagreeable, as Mayor Crane would tell us.
Exactly.
Issues are issues, and people are
Issues
people.
are issues, and then to move on. And I think that is something that is lacking a lot today in elected positions, but much appreciated to this body.
Okay.
I'll just second that. We've had a lot of discussions back and forth together. Any disgust or dismay in my tone or anything is really directed at the powers that be, not this body.
It's the issue, not the people.
For sure. We've had long conversations, and really the situation is what it is, and I would just kind of reciprocate in that. Totally respect each member's position on this one.
How dare you reciprocate that? Sure.
Yeah, I would say ditto. I just have very strong feelings about that would not allow me to support this, but I definitely respect and I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into the motion. It tries to help. I think unfortunately our motion doesn't. It asks them to do something, but it doesn't make it so they have to do it. But yeah, I definitely appreciate that that's the voice that's being sent back, is that there's some problems.
Any comment from?
No.
Okay.
I've made plenty.
And once again, this is not a fun decision to make. It is not any decision that any one of the five of us take lightly. We are, even though it's 1 cent for every $4 spent, it's money out of our residents' pockets, and it's money out of my pocket. And while yes, this has already been approved, even with or without our support, that 1 cent for every $4 does add up, as clearly we can see from the estimates that will be coming back to our community. And we are grateful to our residents for voicing their opinion and for expressing their concerns on this and so many other matters. And we would ask that as we continue to have items like this come before our council, that they continue to reach out to us so that we can have that healthy discussion. With that, we will move on to our calendar. So this week we have many events, specifically Harriman Town Days. Tomorrow night, Wendy, can you just speak to a couple of things that are coming the next couple of nights?
So tomorrow night is family night. Friday night is superhero night. Saturday is the parade. The carnival goes all 3 nights and Saturday. So fireworks Saturday night.
What time on Saturday are the fireworks?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock. Fantastic. We do have our next Planning Commission meeting tomorrow night at 7 p.m. We have our next City Council work meeting and general meeting on July 11th. So this will be the only City Council meeting for the month of July. We will, just to make sure that we're doing this all correctly, we will be adjourning this meeting in just a moment. It is my intent to move straight into a special community development and renewal agency meeting. After that, we will recess back into our work meeting and then a possible closed meeting after that as well. So with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn our general meeting.
So moved.
Okay, motion second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are so adjourned. Okay.